Imagine, just for a moment, that you are standing right in front of a blank canvas. The studio is totally quiet, and you have this image in your mind. Maybe it's a beautifully vibrant landscape or like a deeply emotional abstract piece.
Right.
You want it to be filled with these rich, complex textures. You want the colors to literally vibrate, to feel alive, to practically leap off the fabric, you know? So you take your brush, you load it up with these brilliant, expensive pigments, and you just start mixing them.
As we all do.
Right. You blend the yellows and the blues, really trying to capture that perfect atmospheric tension. You work the surface, trying to force the magic to happen.
Yeah.
But then you take a step back. You look at your canvas, and instead of that luminous magic you pictured, what do you actually see? You see a muddy, flat, lifeless surface.
Yeah.
The colors are just bled together into this dull, grayish paste. The vibration is completely gone. The canvas just feels dead.
It is arguably, the most universal and devastating frustration for anyone who has ever picked up a brush. We try so hard to capture the breathtaking complexity of light and nature, but we end up with something that feels heavy, opaque, kind of amateur, honestly.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking.
It really is. But the fascinating thing here is that this failure isn't necessarily a lack of talent. It is a perceptive error. We have this intuitive, almost hardwired belief that in order to create complex colors, we must physically mix them together, either, on our wooden palette or directly on the canvas.
We blend and we blend.
Exactly, thinking we are creating nuance, but physically mashing pigments together actually does the exact opposite.
Because of subtractive color, right?
Yeah.
We think we are adding complexity, but physics is literally working against us.
You are hitting on the exact scientific reality there. When you mix pigments, you are literally subtracting the amount of light they can reflect. You destroy their individual identity, you kill the saturation, you eliminate the visual tension between the hues because the chemical structures of the paints are just canceling each other out.
Which perfectly sets up our mission for today. Because today's deep dive is based on a really fascinating stack of sources you brought to the table. We've got detailed studio notes, technique breakdowns, and a literal masterclass video exploring the profound artistic philosophy of Grupio Reim and the master artist Laura Palacios.
Incredible material.
It really is. And just as a heads up to you listening, this is not going to be a basic step-by-step painting tutorial. We're going to step directly inside the mental and visual process of a master painter. We are going to dismantle how you think about a painted surface and reveal a method that solves that muddy canvas problem. Not by adding more color, but through a totally counterintuitive process of controlled excavation.
And to really understand how this masterclass from Laura Palacios completely solves the problem of flat, muddy paintings, we first have to establish the golden rule, the absolute non-negotiable artistic principle of this specific technique.
Okay, wait on.
The rule is this: the colors must never, ever mix, not even a fraction of a millimeter. Each individual color is treated as an independent stratum, a unique geological layer that must remain perfectly intact.
Okay, hold on. I need to challenge this right out of the gate. The core identity of painting, for most of us, is blending. The idea of zero blending sounds like you're just putting stungs on a canvas. Like, how do you get a cohesive, natural-looking image if the colors are strictly forbidden from touching each other chemically?
By stacking them. But preserving them while they stack requires a complete overhaul of the physical materials you use. If you were standing in the studio right now, the first thing you'd notice is the paint itself. You cannot use standard fluid acrylics or watery paints for this.
Because they just run together?
Exactly. If you use thin paint, the layers will inevitably bleed into one another the second they touch, and you are right back to the muddy canvas. You must use high viscosity, heavy body acrylics. We are talking about thick, structural pastes.
So we aren't talking about paint that flows. We were talking about paint that holds a shape, like wet cement or modeling clay.
Precisely the right mental image. The polymer binders in these high-viscosity acrylics are designed to hold the heavy pigments suspended in a rigid structure. And because we aren't brushing liquid paint onto a canvas to blend it, the masterclass throws out traditional paintbrushes entirely.
Oh, really? No brushes at all?
None. A bristle brush would just tear these thick pastes apart and force them to mix.
Which actually leads to one of the most visually surprising parts of these studio notes, because if you look at the tools laid out for this technique, they look more like they belong in a commercial bakery or like a masonry shop than a fine art studio.
Yeah.
You need a large spatula. The notes actually mention that a long, flat pastry spatula, the kind you'd use to frost a massive cake, works perfectly for the large foundational areas. You also need a small, stiff metal spatula with a rounded, delicate tip. And finally, a clean rag.
We will definitely come back to the rag because its role is completely invisible to the final viewer, yet it dictates the success of the entire piece. But let's look at how the artist actually gets this thick, heavy paint onto the canvas without mixing it. This is where the process becomes this progressive, almost cinematic sequence of discovery.
I love how visual this is.
It's beautiful to watch. The artist works rapidly, applying the paint wet on wet using 4 very deliberate colors, and they are all chosen from the same chromatic family to ensure that the final optical transitions feel completely organic.
Let's visualize this sequence for everyone, because it really paints a picture in your mind of how physical this is. The artist takes that large pastry spatula and scoops up a massive, generous amount of the first color, which is cream. And they aren't trying to lightly wash the canvas, they are building physical thickness.
Yes, actual volume.
Right. They spread this heavy cream across the surface, and then they carefully iron it flat with the spatula. It creates this perfectly smooth, unbroken foundation. This layer provides the deep, underlying luminosity. It's like the inner light of the painting.
It is the glow that will eventually illuminate the entire piece from the inside out. But here is where the technical discipline really begins. They don't wait for that cream layer to dry. While it is still completely wet and vulnerable, the artist immediately moves to the second layer, topaz.
Okay.
They take a large amount of this warm golden brown hue and they float it gently right on top of the wet cream.
Floating is the key word there. I mean, they aren't pressing down into the canvas at all.
No, not at all. They are gliding the spatula parallel to the surface, laying down a new uniform film of topaz without disturbing the cream beneath it. It acts as a warm structural transition, so now the canvas holds 2 distinct levels of depth.
But wait, I have to stop here because the physical realities of acrylic paint are just screaming in my head right now. Acrylic dries incredibly fast. It's famous for it. If you are stacking these massive, thick layers of wet paint on top of each other, doesn't that bottom layer of cream start forming a skin and drying before you even get to the next colors?
Yeah.
Like, how do you even have the time to do all this wet on wet?
That is a brilliant catch, and it's actually a testament to why the volume of the paint matters so much. When you apply acrylic in thin washes, yes, the water evaporates instantly and it dries in minutes.
Right.
But when you apply it in these massive, thick blocks, the sheer volume of the acrylic polymer creates its own microclimate. The top surface of the paint actually seals the moisture inside the block. So while a thin painting dries in 5 minutes, this thick, stratified block of wet paint will actually stay workable and wet for hours.
Ah. Okay, so the thickness is a feature, not just a stylistic choice. It literally buys you time.
It buys you the time necessary to introduce the dominant atmosphere, which brings us to the third layer, turquoise. Using the exact same gliding method, the artist spreads a thick blanket of turquoise over the wet topaz. This introduces the cold temperature to the piece. It's rich, it's moody. But visually, at this specific moment in the studio, the entire canvas is just a flat expanse of turquoise.
Right, the luminous cream and the warm topaz, they're gone.
They have vanished. They are completely swallowed by the cold blue.
They are invisible. But mechanically, they are perfectly intact, just resting in the dark underneath. Which brings us to the final application, the fourth layer, Prussian blue. And this is where the psychology of this masterclass totally breaks my brain.
Oh, it's intense.
It is. The artist takes this incredibly dark, heavy, almost abyssal Prussian blue, and they spread it over the entire canvas. If I walked into the studio right now, having missed the first 20 minutes, I would just see a dark, flat, wet, almost black painting. And honestly, isn't that terrifying for an artist?
Terrifying in what sense?
Well, in the sense that you just spent all this time and probably a small fortune in high-quality pigments, beautifully laying down this radiant cream, this golden topaz, this vibrant turquoise, and then you purposefully bury all of it in total darkness.
It feels wrong, doesn't it?
It does. You swallow the light. As a creator, the anxiety of covering up something beautiful with a void of dark blue has to be overwhelming.
For a traditional painter, yes, it would feel like an act of destruction. It feels like you are killing the light. But this is where the philosophy of Gruppo Riem requires a total paradigm shift. The artist isn't terrified of the dark blue layer because they know they aren't actually painting a picture yet.
Wait, what do you mean?
They are not creating an image. Over these 4 layers, they have simply been constructing a solid block of stratified color. They are building the raw material. The artwork isn't lost in the dark, it is simply waiting to be freed. The artist is looking at that wet, dark canvas the same way a sculptor looks at a slab of marble.
Oh, wow. That completely reframes the medium. Because right now, with the canvas completely covered in wet Prussian blue, the traditional idea of painting, the act of adding pigment to a surface to create an image, it completely stops. From this moment forward, not a single drop of new paint will be added to the canvas. The addition phase is entirely over.
Yes. Now, the real work begins. The masterclass transitions from construction to excavation. The artist picks up that small, stiff metal spatula with the rounded tip, and they begin to take paint away.
We are subtracting. And as I'm picturing this, I'm trying to visualize the mechanics. If I have a canvas covered in an inch of thick, wet paint, and I carve a line into it with a metal tool, doesn't the wet paint just slump right back into the trench I just dug?
It would if you were using oils or fluid paints. But again, the structural integrity of that high-viscosity acrylic paste holds the shape of the cut. When the artist presses the metal tip into that thick, wet block, the paint parts cleanly, leaving a microscopic canyon wall. And the depth of that cut determines the exact color that is revealed to the viewer.
So pressure completely replaces the paintbrush.
Exactly. The logic of the physical pressure is the core mechanism of the entire illusion. If the artist pushes hard, pressing deeply into the strata, they carve all the way down to the bottom layer. They reveal that initial luminous cream.
So a heavy, aggressive hand brings out the brightest light.
Yes. But if they use a slightly lighter touch, they only carve through the blue and the turquoise, stopping exactly at the second layer. Suddenly, the warm topaz emerges from the dark. If they use an even gentler graze, barely skimming a millimeter beneath the surface, they uncover the cool turquoise. And if they leave an area completely untouched?
That deep, abyssal Prussian blue remains the dominant visual shadow.
You've got it.
Wait, as you're describing this modulation of pressure, my brain just went straight to music. It's exactly like playing a piano.
Oh, that's interesting. How so?
Think about a piano keyboard. The physical pressure of your fingers dynamically changes the emotional tone of the note you produce. If you strike a key with force, the hammer hits the string hard and it rings out bright and loud and sharp. If you press the key softly, it's a muted, delicate whisper.
I see where you're going with this.
The artist here is literally playing the depth of the paint. The canvas is the instrument, the metal spatula is the player's hand, and they are modulating the physical pressure, millimeter by millimeter, to find the emotional frequency of the color.
That is an incredibly apt way to visualize the physical sensation of this technique. They are playing the depth. They have to feel the tactile resistance of the thick acrylic paste through the metal tool. It requires immense sensitivity. But there is a massive logistical problem that occurs between every single one of those musical notes, between every single stroke of the spatula.
Okay, wait, I just realized the flaw here. I'm picturing the physics of this. If I take a metal spatula and I dig a deep trench all the way down to the cream layer, my tool is now covered in a wet, sludgy mixture of Prussian blue, turquoise, topaz, and cream.
Yes, it's covered in mud.
So if I go to make a second delicate stroke to reveal some topaz, the second that dirty metal touches the canvas, I'm just smearing that gray, mixed-up mud right back into my pristine layers. I'm destroying the canvas.
Which is exactly why we have to talk about the rag. We mentioned it at the beginning, but this simple piece of cloth is the unsung hero of the studio. The entire illusion of chromatic stratification relies on absolute purity. If even a microscopic amount of wet paint remains on the metal, it will redeposit onto the canvas.
And ruin it.
It will contaminate the pristine layers, the separation of the strata collapses, and suddenly you are right back to the muddy, flat canvas we talked about at the very beginning.
So the discipline has to be absolute.
It is exhausting discipline. The rhythm of the studio becomes excavate shape, wipe the tool completely clean, excavate another shape, wipe clean. The spatula must be returned to absolute zero after every single interaction with the canvas. You cannot make 2 consecutive cuts without wiping the blade.
That requires so much patience. Which brings me to the ultimate question for you listening. Why go through this incredibly stressful subtractive process? Why manage the anxiety of the Prussian blue? Why constantly wipe a spatula? Why carefully balance the microscopic pressure of your hand? I mean, why not just take a clean brush and paint a patch of cream next to a patch of topaz, next to a patch of blue?
Because of the optical physics of how light interacts with the surface, when you paint colors side by side with a traditional brush, you inevitably create slightly blended fuzzy edges where the wet paints meet. The soft bristles of the brush naturally pull the pigments into one another.
They bleed.
Exactly. But in this process of chromatic stratification, because the colors were layered wet on wet but never physically mixed, and because they are revealed through the sharp, clean cut of a metal blade, they retain 100% of their original chemical saturation.
The visual sensation must be jarringly pure.
It is a level of clarity you rarely see in painting. When the ambient light in a gallery hits the canvas, it isn't bouncing off a muddy, mixed pigment. It is bouncing off pure cream, pure topaz, pure turquoise. Furthermore, the transitions between the colors aren't created by blending, they are created by the physical, three-dimensional topography of the paint itself. The sharp edges of the cuts create microscopic shadows and highlights along the canyon walls of the acrylic.
So it's literally interacting with the light in the room, not just simulating light with paint.
Exactly. The brain of the viewer perceives this massive, overwhelming complexity of color. It looks impossibly rich and nuanced, but that richness is secretly just the result of pristine, uncontaminated stratification.
You know what it sounds like? It sounds like ancient stone. When you see a finished piece done with this masterclass technique, I imagine it doesn't even look like a painting anymore. It must look like a canyon wall or a cliff face that has been eroded by wind and water over thousands of years. You see these jagged, organic reveals of color that feel like they grew there naturally. It has the weight of geology in it.
It truly does. And if we step back and look at the philosophical implications of Laura Palacios' method, it shifts the entire paradigm of what it means to create art. This technique transforms the act of painting into a two-dimensional sculpture.
A two-dimensional sculpture. I love that phrasing.
Because the artist is no longer just adding matter to a flat surface, which is how we have defined painting for centuries. They're sculpting a volume. That thick block of wet acrylic becomes a spatial environment that holds a hidden chromatic history. Every movement of the spatula, every minute change in pressure isn't creating something new. It's just revealing a part of a story that was already fully written inside the block.
It's the classic Michelangelo analogy, isn't it? The master looks at the block of raw marble and says the statue is already perfectly complete inside of it, and the sculptor's only job is to have the vision to chip away the excess material to reveal it.
It is exactly that, but applied to the fluid, unpredictable world of acrylics. The breathtaking final image, with all its light and warmth and atmospheric depth, was actually fully complete and resting quietly in the dark beneath that Prussian blue before the excavation even started. The master artist simply had to have the courage to bury it and the technical discipline to uncover it.
To uncover it without contaminating it. That is just an incredible way to approach a canvas.
It completely changes how you look at the act of creation itself. You stop seeing a painting as a collection of brushstrokes, and you start seeing it as an archaeology of color.
Wow. So, to leave you with something to chew on as we wrap up today's deep dive, next time you look at a beautifully complex painting in a gallery, or a weathered, peeling brick building in your city, or even a rugged natural landscape, I want you to ask yourself, what lies beneath the surface layer?
That's a great question.
Right. We are so accustomed to judging the world and even the people around us by their outermost shell. But how much of what we perceive as truly beautiful or complex in this world is actually just a strategic revealing of hidden depths?
Think about your own life or your own work. We live in a culture that constantly tells us we need to add more. We need more skills, more words, more layers, more tasks to create something of value.
Always adding.
Always adding. But how might you apply this subtractive way of thinking? What if the masterpiece you are trying to create, whether it's a project, a relationship, or just your own sense of peace, is already there, fully formed, just waiting in the dark? Perhaps realizing true brilliance isn't always about what you can aggressively add to the canvas, but having the courage and the discipline to carefully, deliberately strip the excess away.